Celebrate Thanksgiving with Safeway. This week at Safeway, get whole Signature Farms frozen turkey 10 to 15.5 pounds for $8 each, or 16.1 to 22 pounds for $10 each. Member price of the minimum $50 purchase. Limit one per household. Plus, packs of Coca-Cola, Pepsi, 7-Up, Dr. Pepper, or AHA sparkling water are buy two, get three free. Limit 3 free items. Also this week, get 5-pound bags of Signature Farms russet potatoes for 97 cents each with digital coupon. Limit 1. Visit Safeway.com or head in store for more details.
So it goes back about 4,000 years further than what they thought. And the scientific name for tobacco is Nicotiana tabacum. And doesn't that sound like some sort of like Sports Illustrated model or something? Nicotiana tabacum, found, seen on the streets today. But hi, my name is Richard Dix, and this is How Did That Happen? A podcast where I look at everyday things or events and try to figure out how they came to be. Every week I will research one topic, and by the end of the episode, I hope to truly have the answer to the question, how did that happen? Hello, and welcome to another episode of How Did That Happen? This week we are discussing tobacco and cigarettes. Come along for the ride this week as I ask, tobacco and cigarettes, how did that happen? All right. Thanks for coming back for another episode of How Did That Happen? HDTH. We are on episode 36 right now. And this one is about, like I said, tobacco and cigarettes, so it should be a good one. Let's see, what am I reading right now? Like I said on the last episode, I was reading the book Where the Children Take Us, which is an interesting nonfiction book about basically a woman's journey to raise her kids in London as an immigrant and still make them like very successful people. And a few of them end up being like successful people that you would know, actors and people that you see on TV. But it's really just a story. And like the whole point of the book, though, is that at the end, she ends up going to to Buckingham Palace and watch her son be like knighted. And she's so blown away that, she never saw her world. She never saw her life getting to this point. And so she, kind of has this idea of like, oh, it's crazy where the children take us, And so yeah, it was a pretty good book, and now I've moved on to Trevor Noah's Born a Crime, which is actually a really good book. He find out he was born during apartheid, and his story, I'm telling you, his story is it's remarkable to really hear the way that he grew up, and I would definitely recommend it. I haven't finished it, but I would definitely recommend it. I don't know if there's anything else really to say to get off my chest here before we get into the episode. I don't think so. So without further ado, this week it's tobacco and cigarettes. Thank you guys for pressing play. So, depending on who you ask, the first people to discover it and use tobacco were the people from the Mesoamerica era, like place on the map. There's a Mesoamerica. Is it an era? When I looked it up, I always thought it was just like a place. I guess it could be considered a time, but the way I consider Mesoamerica, or what I consider it to be, is that space, like starting at southern Mexico and going into Central America. That is quote unquote Mesoamerica, and that is what a lot of the articles that I read kind of point back to, that being like the ground zero, if you will, of where tobacco kind of originated in the entire world, which is interesting. I didn't know that. I just assumed, I would have assumed before, that tobacco was everywhere, that it's just, but what you find, it's like horses, you think horses are not from everywhere in the world. They are from a specific place, and I'm not going to say what it is, because I don't think I actually even know. I just know they're not all over the world. Are they from America? Are they from Europe? Are they in America? I think they're an American thing, right? Who knows? I'm sure someone will let me know on the Twitter page where horses come from. But yeah. So they found evidence that the people in Mesoamerica have been using it for about 12,000 years. And this goes against what people had originally thought, which was that it had been growing for about 8,000 years. So it goes back about 4,000 years further than what they thought. And the scientific name for tobacco is Nicotiana tabacum. And doesn't that sound like some sort of like Sports Illustrated model or something? Nicotiana tabacum, but found, seen on the streets today. But yeah, so that's the actual scientific name for it. American tribes carry tobacco in pouches as a readily acceptable trade item, as well as smoking it in pipe ceremonies, whether for sacred ceremonies or for those to seal a treaty or agreement. And I watched a lot of stuff that was saying, like reports from the early European settlers who saw this happened, and then they were like, it looks like they got more than tobacco in those pipes just from the way that they're acting, and I believe that too. But I believe that because there's no definitive answer so far as what was in peace pipes. No, nobody knows. But I would imagine it was some mixture of tobacco, salvia, is whatever other smokable hallucinogenic you could find. I'm not even sure. Because I did see some place I was reading. I read so much for the stuff that said that there was a culture that mixed tobacco with salvia for like some sort of ritual. But among the Cree, the Ojibwe, definitely didn't get it right, guys. Sorry, of Canada and North Central United States, it is offered to the Creator with prayers. It is used in sweat lodges, pipe ceremonies, and is presented as a gift. Side note to that, I just recently went to the is it the Museum of the Native. The Museum of the American Indian in the Smithsonian. It's one of the Smithsonians in D.C. But I've been to quite a few of the Smithsonians, but I've never been to that one, and it was very interesting. The reason I bring this up right now is because they had this space where they talk about all the different afterlives, the way the Native Americans viewed the universe and what comes after and all that stuff, and kind of broke down the different beliefs based off the regions in the country. And that's something that I never really thought about, is what Native Americans thought about like heaven or whatever they thought it to be. So if you want to go, that's definitely a good place to check it out. There's so much information in that museum. It was overwhelming. It was just overwhelming. If you go to the website, they undersell it. I will honestly say, when I went to the website, I was just like, oh, okay, I guess, because I was just killing some time before I went to see a baseball game. But I ended up spending like almost more than 2 hours in there, and was just like, I gotta go. Like, it's just because at some point your brain just gets saturated and you don't have enough. You're not taking anything else inside your brain. We want to get to explaining the cigarette. And so Wikipedia defines a cigarette as a narrow cylinder containing burnable material, typically tobacco, that is rolled in a thin paper for smoking. And the word cigarette is French for little cigar. Nicotine is defined as a naturally produced alkaloid in the nightshade family of plants. Now, this next part is interesting. I don't think I knew this before. Is that nightshades, as they are called, are a family of flowering plants that have a wide variety of organisms. It's a diverse family, and it includes tomatoes, potatoes, eggplants, bell peppers, and a bunch of other stuff. Go look it up. And imagine that family, quote unquote, at Thanksgiving, the potatoes, and all that other stuff, your bell peppers and your eggplants. Before this, you would have never have imagined a tobacco plant going to dinner with a tomato plant. So, for that imagery alone, you're welcome. This also means that there are trace amounts of nicotine. Excuse me. This also means that there are trace amounts of nicotine in all those foods. There's a small amount of tobacco in your tomato tobacco, you know what they say. So that explains, you baked potato people out there. I knew there had to be a reason. Like, you're out there just catching a little buzz off your baked potato, because I don't know. I'm not big on them. I'm not against them. Like, I'll eat them, but I mean, but there's so many other things you could do with a potato, to me, that would impress me. Make some chips, make some fries or something, make some home fries, hash browns. And then people are like, oh, we're just going to bake it. Oh, cool. Okay. So yeah, but we're going to get to tobacco in Europe. And so the Spanish introduced tobacco to Europeans around 1528, give or take. And when it was introduced to Europe via Spain, the tobacco was wrapped in corn husk and probably actually corn silk. Tobacco would also be sniffed in the form of snuff. And if you're not familiar with snuff, it is the inhalation of dried tobacco through the nose. And that is, as someone who's used tobacco, I've used it a lot in my life. I don't use it now, but I used to smoke cigarettes. I used to be a pack a day guy. I did. I'm not no longer. I don't smoke cigarettes at all. But I used to dip as well, and I used to chew tobacco. So I've had tobacco in a large array of different ways, but never once have I ever looked at that stuff and be like, you know what, I'm gonna snort that. Like, I don't understand it. But it was a way that people consumed it. But yeah, if you saw on the Twitter page, I posted a picture of King Francis II, who was he was a boy king from France in I believe it was the early 1500s. And he was a teenager when he first tried the stuff. And he said that it cleared his nasal passages, which had been severely blocked. And like some articles I read just said this guy had like super super like hard, like what they say, like a sinus infection or something like that. Just that just like lasted for a long time. But like when he sniffed this stuff, it opened it up. The sad part about King Francis II is that he died at 17. He just fainted one day, just fell out, and nobody really knows why. A lot of stuff back then nobody really knew. I mean, you got your speculation, your conjecture, but that's literally what happened. I think I don't really know. Like he just, one day he just fell out, and they were like, he's dead. And this whole family is a sad kind of a sad story. I'll go into it really quickly, just because when you're reading this stuff, I just kept reading. I was just like, I'm like, it's crazy. Like I was doing the research last week, and I'm feeling in my office feeling sorry for this boy that died 500 years ago that I didn't even know, and then who knew if he would have actually cared about me in any way. But yeah, so after he dies, his brother takes over. His brother was only 10 years old. So I mean, geez, and so like what was going on back then in the France in the 1500s? And I'll tell you what was going on because I looked it up. I was like, how does it happen that you end up having a 17-year-old king and then a 10-year-old king? So what happens is their dad, King Henry II, he died in an unfortunate jousting accident, which reminds you of Austin Powers, an unfortunate smelting accident. But he was hit in the eye with a splinter of a wooden joust, and that basically led to sepsis of the eye, which he died from. That's some pretty tragic stuff. So he died. His dad died accidentally, and then he died basically accidentally, and then boom, you got like a fourth grader that's running France. But that's just interesting. So then we get to tobacco in colonial America, and so basically tobacco in colonial America is what leads to tobacco in Europe. Just to be clear. Because what I just read kind of jumps a little bit ahead of actually when Christopher Columbus, misguidedly finds his way to America, even though he doesn't know it's America. You know the whole story. And so in 1492, Columbus was warmly greeted by the Native American tribes he encountered when he first set foot on the new continent, and they brought gifts of fruit, food, spears, and more. And among these gifts were dried up leaves of tobacco, like the tobacco plant. And so they were, and as they were not edible and had a distinct smell to them, those leaves, which the Native Americans had been smoking for over 2 millennia, he just threw them right overboard. He was like, oh, this stuff kind of smells weird and I can't eat it. Why are you giving me this plant? I don't need this. Tossing it overboard. Christopher Columbus is he's made a lot of smart decisions in his life. This is the most Columbus move ever. Dude pulls up on the Bahamas and thinks he's in India, in India, and then names these guys as if he actually is in India. And then when they are like, here's some tobacco, this stuff slaps, bro, he just tosses it right out the ship. He's just like, nah, what else you got? Columbus really is the most oblivious man in the world. It's even said that he only saw the potential in tobacco when he saw that they were actually like coveting it, like the natives were, and they were trading it. So he thought, oh, this is going to actually be like a form of currency. And so this is a quote from a guy who talked to some of the scouts that were with Christopher Columbus when he originally sent them into Cuba. It's a long quote, so I think I won't read it all, but I thought it was interesting just to hear, that they don't know much about cigarettes or anything like that. And so it says, men with half-burned wood in their hands and certain herbs to take their smokes, which are some dried herbs put in a certain leaf, also dry, like those the boys make on the day of the Passover of the Holy Ghost, and having lighted one part of it, by the other they suck, absorb, or receive that smoke inside with the breath, and by which they come benumbed and almost drunk. And it is also said that they do not feel fatigue. There's more to it, but I mean, that's just, it's interesting to hear them really kind of describe cigarettes or a cigarette-like thing for the first time. And so by 1600s, they had replaced the corn silk with a fine paper called a papelette. I don't know. I'm not going to do that again. But yeah, it's just a fine paper. The French, the Spanish, and the Portuguese initially referred to the plant as a sacred herb, and because of its valuable medicinal properties, that's why they did that. And the French would also just take it all the way to the top and call it the Queen's herb for a time. There were a lot of people who, when it first came out, like I said, they looked at it as like an something that made you feel better, something that numbed you, made it so you weren't tired. So there were a lot of there were health benefits that were coming with it. There was a man named Anthony Shute who published a I don't know what you can call it, a book, maybe a pamphlet called Tobacco, and it's basically like it's the first English discussion of like tobacco itself and the health properties it can give you and all of that. So that's pretty interesting. The English were actually reluctant to import tobacco into their country And King James wrote about his disdain for the plant. He was quoted as saying that it is loathsome to the eye and hateful to the nose and harmful to the brain and dangerous to the lungs. This guy was laying it all out. And in the black stinking fume of thereof, nearest resembling the horrible Stygian smoke of the pit that is bottomless. You think it's easy to read what I'm reading? It's not. I can read. There's more S's and stuff and E's here than there normally are. But he was laying it into it. He's not even lying. I'm sorry if people out there smoke. Like I said, I used to smoke, so I'm not hating on you. It just is what it is what it is. It's not the most attractive habit to have. Let's see. And the cigarettes were said to have spread to Asia via Spain as well. So Spain's given us a lot really over the years, and they did this through their colonization of the Philippines and also through other European settlements in Asia. And I never really thought about this, but in the video I watched, put it into perspective. The fact that tobacco was native to the Americas, so it had to be brought to Asia. It wasn't something that just there are some things that we look up in the show, and it's like, oh, everybody was kind of doing their version of the same thing before it became mainstream. But this is one thing that actually did have to come from this particular part of the world because it didn't grow anywhere else. And so then we get to the modernizing of the cigarette. So in 1845, the French State Tobacco Company began making cigarettes, and that's probably where we really get the first real injection of that kind of word into like the zeitgeist, and it begins to be like, oh, what are these? These are cigarettes. Before that, they probably had all sorts of, like we said, different types of names. They're also wrapped with different things. So there was no standard at that point. The first patented cigarette making machine was invented by Juan Nepomuceno Adorno of Mexico in 1847. Yeah. In 1875, the Allen and Ginter Company in Richmond, Virginia offered a prize of $75,000, which is equal to $1.8 million today, for the invention of a machine able to roll cigarettes. And so they basically put out a call that was like, make us something that can roll a bunch of cigarettes. And I live in Richmond, actually, and I do have to say I drive through a beautiful neighborhood named Ginter Park all the time on the way home from work. And I've always wondered what this guy Ginter did to get that entire neighborhood named after him. And it turns out all you have to do is revolutionize the cigarette business. And so there's a man named Bonsack who took up the challenge and left college to devote his time to building such machine. In 1880, he had his first working prototype, which was destroyed by a fire while it was in storage in Lynchburg, Virginia. So many things destroyed by fire back then. And Bonsack he rebuilt it and filed a patent application on September the 4th, 1880. And the patent was granted the following year. So once he did it, once Bonsack made it, Allen and Ginter ordered a machine, but then they actually rejected it because they said that, and this is kind of crazy, they said that they didn't know how people would respond to a cigarette that was made by a machine, which is ridiculous because that was the whole point of your actual sweepstakes or whatever or job posting. But some people said it was just so they could actually just save the prize money and they wouldn't have to give it away. But what actually happened was Bonsack just then went into business with a guy named James Buchanan Duke, and the rest is kind of cigarette machine history. Okay, so then now we get to cigarettes in modern America. And cigarettes were first, and I say cigarettes, I mean like the actual cigarettes themselves, not just the idea of using tobacco and smoking tobacco or whatever, but cigarettes were first introduced into the United States in the early 19th century. And before this, tobacco was used primarily in pipes and cigars by chewing and snuff, like we said, just sniffing it right up the nose. And by the time of the Civil War, the cigarette had become more popular, and federal tax was first imposed on cigarettes in 1864. And we'll talk a little bit more about federal tax later when I throw some fast facts at you guys about cigarettes, but we'll move on. Shortly afterwards, the development of the cigarette manufacturing industry led to their quickly becoming a major U.S. tobacco product. And at the same time, the populist health reform movement led to early anti-smoking activity. And from 1880 to 1920, this activity was largely motivated by moral and hygienic concerns rather than actual health issues, meaning they were just like, this is disgusting of a thing. This doesn't look good. It's not. That was like their whole move, instead of just being like, oh, you'll die from, cancer and stuff. Like it was a kind of a different actually like focus they had. And so in World War I, we'll see cigarettes were given out free to the soldiers in the form of war rations, which is like the ultimate version of the crack dealer giving you a pinch for free, knowing you'll come back, for more and buy double. And the evidence of that is that, and this is, the next war over, but the next imagine they were just wars, neighboring wars. But the next war afterwards, by the end of World War II, 4 out of 5 British men were smokers, and you have to believe that came from at least a part of it, that it being a part of their war rations. And since the 1920s, scientists and doctors have been able to link smoking with respiratory illness, and that's why I said earlier, from 1880 to 1920, the whole idea was like, oh, that's unbecoming, it doesn't smell good, it's not attractive. Then it becomes in the 20s, oh, this may actually be something that could like harm you, and that brings us right into cigarettes being connected to health, which is the whole thing. And I'm going to kind of go back, and we'll see that for a long time, people always kind of had an idea that you can just look at somebody smoking and be like, that's not something you want to do forever.
Coffin nails. Yes, that's what cigarettes are, according to the Medical Research Council. We've all heard something of the kind before, yet almost everybody smokes, including thousands young enough to know better. And as smoking is nowadays allowed nearly everywhere, it's on the increase year after year. So is lung cancer.
In 1602, an anonymous English author published an essay titled Work of Chimney Sweepers, which stated that illnesses often seen in chimney sweepers were caused by soot, and that tobacco may have similar effects. And this is 1602. This was one of the earliest known instances of smoking being linked to health. So literally 400 years ago, they were like, this might not end well, guys. And so the first real protest about smoking cigarettes was just about how nasty it was. Like I said earlier, that was how they led their campaigns. But during the 1920s, the first medical reports linking smoking to lung cancer began to actually show up. And many newspaper editors refused to report these findings, as they did not want to offend the tobacco companies who advertised heavily in their media. So it's like, we're not going to sit here and slander the guys who literally cut our checks. The milder flu cure tobacco blends used in cigarettes during the early 20th century made the smoking easier to inhale and increased nicotine absorption into the bloodstream. And during World War I, Army surgeons praised cigarettes for helping the wounded relax and ease their pain. And so you see that a lot with tobacco being really used as some sort of like pain reliever, which, as someone who smoked, like I said, I smoked for years, I just don't get it. I just wonder, is it different? Was it a different tobacco? I'm not sure. Smoking was first linked to lung cancer and other diseases, like I said, right around the 20s, and then throughout the 40s and 50s, they would kind of just continue to build upon that research. And what's crazy is that in the early 1950s, there was a cigarette actually called Kent that used asbestos in its filters, and it was just like a part of like their makeup. And these cigarettes were actually marketed as healthier alternatives to the cigarettes that were already on the market. You can't make this stuff up. All right. So now to end this segment, before we go into the other ones, we're gonna do just some quick fast facts about some tobacco and cigarette stuff. I think those are always some of the more interesting things. And so we got fast facts. And so in 2019, the largest tobacco companies spent $8.2 billion marketing cigarettes and smokeless tobacco in the United States. And that shakes out to just about $22.5 million every day. And then in the 1980s, there were almost 180,000 tobacco growing farms in America. And in 2012, there were only about 10,000. In the United States is the fourth largest tobacco producing country in the world, and that follows China, India, and Brazil. In 2018, 2 states in America, North Carolina and Kentucky, accounted for more than 70% of the actual tobacco cultivation in the entire country. 4 companies, Philip Morris USA, Reynolds America Incorporated, ITG Brands, and Liggett, account for 92% of the U.S.'s cigarette sales. And let's see, on average, federal and state excise taxes account for 44.3% of the retail price for cigarettes. So like almost half of the price of cigarettes is just tax. A 10% increase in price has been estimated to reduce overall cigarette consumption by 3 to 5%. And that is how cigarettes and tobacco happened. And now it's time for the roundup. And we're going to round it up. Tobacco originates in the Middle Americas about 12,000 years ago. It spreads to Europe through Spain's conquest of the New World. Cigarette machines take it from a luxury item to one that can be used by all. Things I didn't know before. And now I know them. Never heard of these things. What are they? All right. Only had a couple of things that I really didn't know before, that I didn't kind of mention in the other segments. We'll say, let's see. I think there's only two. This first one is interesting. It's always interesting how chemicals affect outside chemicals affect your brain and stuff. So nicotine reduces the amount of rapid eye movement sleep, REM sleep, and if we've talked about, I think it was in the episode 25, about dreams, and that REM sleep is some of the most important sleep that you need, and so the fact that I guess nicotine reduces that it's not good, but I would have never thought that it would have an effect on it like that. And the last one, I guess this is. I did kind of mention part of this earlier, but I think the other part that I didn't know is how long it lasted. We mentioned the cigarette becoming a ration for the soldiers starting in World War I. This actually, I didn't know that because this goes all the way up to Vietnam, and heck, it may even go even further. I'm not sure if anybody knows. If anybody who listens has ever in the military or served in a war and could provide any light on that. Hit us up on the Twitter page, at HDTHAPPENs. It's just HDT happen but yeah, so that's pretty much it for the things I didn't know, or that I was able to remember, basically. All right, that's been another episode of How Did That Happen? Always like to thank you guys for coming by and pressing play and going along for the ride. I see the listens are up a little bit. I see I'm getting listened to, getting picked up in a couple more countries. I see you out there, Australia. That's pretty cool. I don't know if there's anything else to get out. So I'll see you guys next week.
Judy was boring.
Hello.
Then Judy discovered ChumbaCasino.com.
It's my little escape.
Now Judy's the life of the party.
Oh, baby, mama's bringing home the bacon.
Whoa, take it easy, Judy. The Chumba life is for everybody. So go to ChumbaCasino.com and play over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.
Okay, round two. Name something that's not boring.
A laundry? Ooh, a book club. Computer solitaire, huh?
Sorry, we were looking for Chumba Casino. That's right. ChumbaCasino.com has over 100 casino-style games. Join today and play for free for your chance to redeem some serious prizes. ChumbaCasino.com. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited by law. 18 plus terms and conditions apply. See website for details.